Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the Blowback Roundtable. I have Ben, Ian, and Carla with us this morning with me. We are expecting Scott Ritter shortly. He always likes to make a grand entrance. We are hoping he joins us shortly. But there is a lot to discuss. We were just going to get started. Obviously, the Middle East is the biggest topic of conversation all over social media. And everywhere, really. What can be said? I mean, where to even begin? I mean, we can begin in 1896 with, the beginning of the Zionist ideological movement. Or we can go to 1948, 1949 with Israeli statehood, or 1967. What do you guys think?
We could start with Saturday.
Okay, yeah. So what happened, Ian? What happened on Saturday?
So I mean, I'll just share it from my personal perspective. I was at home, I was working on my book, and then Maria, my girlfriend, came up to me and was like, "Oh, something started with Hamas," because I wasn't paying attention. I was writing. Then so she comes in, "Oh, something's going on with Hamas and Israel," and I was like, "Okay." I mean, there's always something going on. Then it's just like I happened to tune into social media later, and I was like, "Oh, wow, yeah, no, this is serious. It's huge." But basically, to wrap it up in something that's digestible, I would say that it started as infiltrations, cross-border security, past and into military compounds and neighborhoods. All of their automated security networks just failed or were hacked, depending who you believe. And the IDF and police and everybody was completely unprepared. And even Hamas, AP News today reported, Hamas themselves said they were astonished by how successful this was. They were expecting the IDF to just push them back. They were hoping, for, some hostages and just retreat back to Gaza. They were not expecting to get as far as they did. And they literally said it's a paper tiger. They were just astonished by how quickly the IDF collapsed. So it turned into, I think anyone would agree, it's the single worst military defeat in Israeli history. It's huge. Even if they recover, even if they gain, a strategic win from this, the tactical defeat is huge. It's a huge stain on their military reputation.
True.
I mean, just to say something about the personal end of it. On Saturday, my wife and I went out so I could have an open MRI on my back, and afterwards, as a reward, we went to one of our favorite delis, called the Parkway Deli, which is in suburban Maryland, and it's a Jewish deli, and so while I was getting the MRI, the open MRI, they have a TV screen on, so that's how I learned about this the invasion or the opening of conflict. So we ended up at the deli, and I wasn't going to engage anyone in conversation about it, but I was listening to other people's conversation at the tables. And they weren't talking about it. It was either not on their radar yet, or there was an avoidance about it, which I found kind of unique. I mean, the tables were close. I could hear a lot of different conversations, but there was no panic or no concern, and it was the holiday, so it was one of the Jewish holidays, so. It was really crowded, and but it wasn't on the radar yet. So my radar was certainly on, but it wasn't part of the conversation.
The first pictures I saw, I didn't take seriously because it was these paragliders, like little rinky-dink things and motorcycles, and okay, it's not going to be anything big, and that was way before Ben Gurion International Airport was hit, and you saw all the people leaving. But yeah, it turned very quickly from something funny in the Middle East to something major. I think they've captured more territory than the Ukraine counteroffensive. They
did actually, but in square kilometers they did. Yeah. And if you look at the links in the YouTube description, anyone who's curious, there are some maps and screenshots from videos in that also. I do find it interesting how on the political aspect, Republicans who just on Friday were saying, oh, no, we have no money to spare. We cannot finance Ukraine anymore. Not a dime, no more. And then just complete 180, just give Israel whatever they ask for. It's just amazing. And I think that kind of shows the even when one party or the other says stop, no more, like the Democrats did in Vietnam, or the Republicans are attempting to do with Ukraine, you have some other region like Israel that reaches out to different people across the political spectrum, so that can continue getting more funding. So it's like a no-win situation. It's American voters are always on the losing end of it. There's always another country to fund a war in.
Yeah, that's true.
We can fund everybody except ourselves. As long as it's war related. It's
that's true. One guy took the cake. I don't know this man, but he's I don't know if Democrat or Republican, but he was Senator Josh Hawley, who pronounced that any aid that is to be sent to Ukraine has to be redirected to Israel. So I think he's going to be on Mirotvorets soon enough.
He's a Republican.
Republican, of course. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of these opinions. You've probably seen everybody's favorite Lindsey Graham, who was in Kiev saying we have this counteroffensive prepared. It's going to smash Russia. That was not so long ago, 3 or 4 months ago. And now he wants to basically bombard Iran's, oil and gas infrastructure. That was live on television. A lot of these people came out. Nikki Haley, or I don't know her Indian name, Nimatra or something like that. Seen that one?
Yes.
Yeah, wipe them out. Let's wipe them out.
Wipe them out. My God.
Yeah, big talk.
And then, Lindsey Graham. Did you just mention Lindsey Graham? Because he about bombing Iran. What about how it's being covered in by the Western media? I mean, it's typical, as has been, how the Middle East, Palestine, Israel has been covered for the past probably 75 years. I'm not sure if they've had the same amount of bias, but my entire lifetime, it's just been entirely biased, pro-Israel, just blatant. There's no such thing as two sides, and it's just over the top. Dishonesty. So that really hasn't changed. I mean,
they had some catchphrases right off the bat on Saturday, but one word that everybody here notices that was repeated all the time was unprovoked.
Unprovoked.
Right. Yeah, where have we heard that one before?
Yes. Right. 70 years of provocation. Doesn't matter. Unprovoked. It's back.
And their complicity. Now they're complicit in this. The Western media is totally complicit in this.
Absolutely.
By ignoring it.
Well, one thing I'd say politically, and just in the news from what I'm seeing, it's interesting because these are the same news agencies that, every little detail in the Russian armed forces, any little thing goes wrong, it's front page news. They're always trying to emphasize any military failure they can find, real or imagined. But with Israel, it's very clear they're carrying water, with this, we were all saying, is a very clear embarrassment. It's a very clear defeat for Israel. But you see all these news agencies carrying water and downplaying the military aspect and bringing up, it's very, very much feels like Butcha 2.0. They're trying to find any kind of civilian atrocity they can think of and make that the focus and not the military failures.
Butcher works for me a lot. The other aspect was two things. One came straight from Netanyahu himself, like day one, when he said he's going to flatten Gaza, was 9/11 for Israel. I thought that was a telling thing. Another one was the Pearl Harbor. And by the way, just today, the anti-defamation ADL, the one that Musk is in, they called it Hiroshima and Nagasaki for Israel. So it's just increasing in magnitude. But I thought that 9/11 and Pearl Harbor were both interesting because there's a lot of evidence that there was a lot of forewarning about both of those things. It actually kind of fits, even though it's used in a Western, they're supposed to elicit nothing but emotion, like it's their tragedy. I mean, Egypt there's 3 or 4 Middle Eastern magazine that says Egypt insists that 2 weeks ago, they have already said something's going on with Hamas, there's something coming from Gaza, and it was apparently ignored. And Tel Aviv has now said they just deny this. This conversation never took place. We never had warning, because that would be a whole new can of worms for Bibi Netanyahu in all sorts of political trouble before this happened anyway.
The two big developments that's happened that I think are worth bringing up because they're ongoing developing stories is one is the Hamas threat to execute hostages if Israel continues unannounced. Now, it's what I found that was interesting about the way they phrase it. They didn't just say airstrikes, they said unannounced airstrikes. So as of right now, we don't know how the Israelis responded because there have been airstrikes since that threat was made, but maybe those were all announced. There's no way to know, or at least I haven't seen any clarification on that yet, if the Israelis took that threat seriously. The second development. Oh,
yes. Go for the second.
The second development was there was an Egyptian fuel and supply convoy, and Israel just said any convoys going through Egyptian territory to Gaza would be bombed, and now that convoy stopped. Now that doesn't necessarily mean Egypt won't supply them, but I do think that was a clear, okay, pull that convoy back. We need to think about what Israel threatens. You know, they didn't push those guys forward. They said, okay, we're going to think about that. So right now I would say Egypt is in the reaction phase. They're reacting to what Israel said. So it'll be interesting to see if they take that threat seriously or push on ahead.
Yeah, and my thoughts about that particular situation is that maybe Egypt is happy and they told, hey, Israel, if you don't want us to send stuff, our people are going to make us send aid. And so you need to say you're going to bomb that aid so we don't have to do it. And it's like a wink, wink, nod, nod behind the scenes, because let's face it, Egypt is as dependent on the U.S. military as Israel is. So, I mean, they're a full-on proxy. Nobody's been more pro-U.S. than al-Sisi, who was the guy that the U.S. selected to lead in Egypt. But I hope I'm wrong. I hope they have some backbone and some sovereignty and are able to act independently. Certainly, if there's any time they can do that, now would be a good time. But I think they're very timid, and there's a lot of strings that the U.S. can pull to control Egypt.
That's true. They also, as this happened in Saturday, they also called in all the reserves and they said they want full military readiness, which might just be standard practice, because just 2 months from now, Egypt is going to be BRICS 11. That's a whole new world for them. And, I know the history of being very, very pro-West. I mean, just to sort of tie it in a little knot, they have, the Muslim Brotherhood organization. That's an Egyptian thing. It's very connected to Hamas. And they had a president who was called Mohamed Morsi, and he was ousted. He died in jail. Yeah. Done. We don't like this shit. So they're very aligned. But, I don't know that angle. But Ian, before the show, you said a lot of videos you can see on Telegram, even on X, formerly Twitter, but you just can't post or see it on YouTube. I wanted to say that those executions of prisoners, unfortunately, they have. I've seen some. There's just too many horrible videos I've seen in the last 2 days. But I don't know if those airstrikes were announced or not. I've seen the videos post the airstrikes, but unfortunately, I've seen some executions too.
There were executions unrelated to that threat, like early on before there was infiltrations had even ended. I don't know if any of those were carrying out the threat itself. Did you happen to see any confirmation of that?
Not the best translator in the world when it comes to the language, so I'm not sure of the. Yes, you're right. I don't know the perfect context, but they were just hostages tied up.
I think what Israel will do is sort of like what they're famous for, like the rescue at Entebbe, is pinpointing where the hostages are first, and trying different methods to extricate the hostages. And once they feel they've done as good a job on that as they can, then they'll go in full force.
Yeah, then it's flattening.
I think they will show some caution initially. That's just my
now
guess.
As far as now this is a guess on my part as well, because we have no idea exactly what the Israeli game plan is going to be. But there has been a very consistent trend with the IDF, and I would say actually globally as well, to rely less on those extractions. Sending in small teams of special forces. Oh, and here
it is with us.
Yes.
Sorry, guys. I apologize for that.
All good. Welcome to the show.
We're glad to see you.
Yes.
So, we are discussing amongst ourselves the issue. I was about to get into the greater context of how Israel came about, Zionism, things like that. But we don't have to do that. Scott, how would you like to present the situation to the audience? The American audience, who probably doesn't know a lot about the Palestinian situation, just because of the media not doing a good job of explaining it to people. So
Maybe I can help. We've read your wonderful piece on Consortium News about the intelligence failure, but a lot of people haven't. So maybe you can start with how this started, but specifically Saturday. How did this happen? Maybe that's a good start point.
Well, I think first of all we have to reflect on what happened on Saturday. It was a massive attack by Hamas on Israel. I mean, it's unprecedented, the scope and scale of the attack that took place, and the Israeli Defense Forces were not prepared for it. Israel was taken by surprise. This is one of the greatest intelligence failures in modern history, and in Israeli history, it's the greatest intelligence failure since an intelligence failure that took place literally 50 years to the date, in 1973, the Yom Kippur War, when the Israeli Defense Forces were once again caught sleeping when Egyptian forces stormed across the Suez Canal and Syrian forces, advanced on the Golan Heights. They were taken by surprise then. They were taken by surprise again. There's that old saying, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice. Well, of course, George W. Bush butchered it.
He butchered that.
Yeah, but shame on you. There was literally no excuse for this. Look, Hamas has been around for some time now. When I traveled to Israel extensively in the 1990s, working in a very intimate fashion with Israeli intelligence on the Iraqi weapons of mass destruction problem, I can tell you that almost every visit that I made, there was a Hamas-related terrorist attack. My very first visit, literally right down the road from where I stayed, Hamas terrorist on October 19th, I believe, blew up a bus on Dizengoff Street, killing 22 people. It's a big deal. When I went back in November, they blew up another bus in Ramat Gan. When I went back in July, they blew up another bus near Jerusalem. I mean, this was Hamas trying to stop the Oslo peace process, which Yitzhak Rabin had signed into effect in September of 1995. He was, of course, assassinated in November of 1995 by a right-wing Israeli fanatic who believed that some rabbi had said because Rabin had betrayed Israel and Jewish faith that he could be killed. But my point is the Hamas issue has been there forever. I remember being taken by my Israeli hosts to a museum. It was a museum only for the IDF. It was actually used to train intelligence officers on both Hezbollah and Hamas. But they had the uniforms, they had the weapons, they had the tactics, they had the pamphlets, they had everything laid out. They knew the enemy. And so, and an important thing in 1973 was the defeat of what they called the conception or conceptualization. They asked themselves, how did we, get it so wrong? And the answer is, well, from an intelligence standpoint, they didn't really. From a collection standpoint, they actually collected all the intelligence you needed to say the Egyptians are not only going to attack, but attack on this day at this point. They had all that information. The day the attack took place, Golda Meir is receiving special briefing from the king of Jordan, in which he said, you're going to be attacked by the Egyptians on this day at this place. What happened, though, is that the Israeli defense leadership had bought into what they call the conception, which is it just didn't make any sense for Egypt do this. It made no sense for them to do it. Yes, they had these capabilities and everything, but there was no reason why Egypt would do this because they knew what our response would be. They knew how we would hurt them, etc. So no, we dismiss all this. It isn't going to happen. In the aftermath, there's a commission, and I'll butcher the name of the commission, the Agronaut Commission, I think it's called, put together by a justice of the Israeli court. They talked about the conception. They said, this whole approach to analysis was fundamentally flawed. And what happened is they created a position within the Israeli intelligence service called Doubting Thomas, a senior colonel who became the most hated person in Israeli intelligence. I met the guy who was in that post when I was there. His job was to be the contrarian. Before any assessment, analysis, anything made its way up to decision makers, it had to go through him personally. And his job was to look through and challenge every single assertion that was made. If somebody said this, he said, how did you do that? If somebody said, this is a data, he said, check it again, find me something different. And he'd send it back all marked up. And they'd have to go in and you couldn't say no, because the way the system was built is this was the safeguard. This was the guy that was going to make sure that no stone was left unturned when putting forward an assessment to his authorities, the Doubting Thomas, they called him. And again, I said, he's the most hated man in intelligence. Everybody went up there. He was highly respected. But everybody I talked to kept saying, he's an asshole because he just threw everything back, made you do your job. Well, the Doubting Thomas position was done away with on the eve of 9/11 when the Israelis decided that they no longer wanted to be prisoner to this. They had a guy named Amos Gilad who was promoted in as the head of the research division of Haman, the Israeli intelligence, and he felt that this Doubting Thomas position was constraining, was limiting the intelligence assessments. He wanted to be freer to think more broadly. What he was really doing is responding to pressure by the United States because the Israelis, working with the United Nations, had come to the conclusion that Iraq didn't have any weapons of mass destruction programs worthy of a military intervention. And that was the last conclusion that the CIA and the United States wanted. So they came in and said, A, stop cooperating with Ritter, B, fire Doubting Thomas, and C, buy into everything we're telling you. And they said, and D, we'll give you a lot of money. And the Israelis went, bingo, we're there. Amos Gilad came in, changed the whole system. Israel flip-flopped on its assessments regarding weapons of mass destruction, suddenly articulated that Saddam had these, was pursuing these, was a threat. If you remember Benjamin Netanyahu infamously testifying before the U.S. Congress prior to the war saying, we know that Iraq is reconstituted its nuclear weapon. Every word he said was a lie, but it didn't matter because Amos Gilad's new Israeli intelligence service had changed its analytical parameters and were producing lies. The truth was no longer valuable. Amos Gilad stayed in this position he was promoted to something called the Military Political Bureau, which is like the most powerful bureaucratic institution in the Israeli defense system. And he ran it. Nothing happened that didn't go through him. And he transformed the entire system. He had that job from 2002 until 2017, I believe. That's a long time. And his tenure destroyed the credibility of Israeli intelligence. They became very good at collecting information, but very bad at giving honest assessments. Every assessment became politicized. This is where we get the Israeli take on the Iranian nuclear program, where every Israeli technical person saying, we're not so sure they're pursuing this nuclear weapons thing, but it suddenly was turned into, yes, and they do things like fabricate intelligence. Instead of doing the honest thing and saying, we don't have anything, they said, well, let's fabricate. And they fabricate things, this famous or infamous laptop they inserted through the Mujahideen al-Qaeda into the IAEA to get inspections in, create the perception of Iranian duplicity. This was all done by the Israelis. They weren't honest at all. And so this is the environment that the intelligence service is going in. It's also taking place at a time when the Israeli military had become increasingly casualty averse. They don't like to die. Now, nobody likes to die. Nobody wants to die. But I'll just tell you as a Marine, if I pointed to a hill and said, hey, guys, we got to take that hill, we'll all die taking that hill because that's our job. That's what we signed up to do. And, we'll, of course, do it with, we'll probably be clever with our tactics and everything, but there is no retreat. There's no backing up. There's no I don't want to do this in the Marine Corps. In the Israeli Defense Force, especially in the modern Israeli society, they don't want to die. They enjoy life too much. They get conscripted. They do their military service. The women go in there to make cute TikTok videos in their tight Israeli uniforms. The men go in to look cool and pick up the cute women making their TikTok videos. Life is a party. Yeah, there's some special forces units that go out there and get dirty, but the mainstream guys, no. And not only that, they're not training to fight. They're trained to be a police force. They join the military, then they go to the West Bank where you get to shoot 10-year-old boys, break their arms, rape girls, do this whole kind of stuff. What occupying armies do, they stop being a combatant force. They started being an occupation force. And that's a different mindset. So you combine this broken intelligence service with this military that doesn't want to suffer casualties. And what you get is what happened in 2021, the last go-around with Hamas, because there's been repeated go-arounds with Hamas. 2021, what the Israelis did is, first of all, they're collecting it. They're very smart and very clever, the Israelis. I mean, from an intelligence standpoint, they are very technically oriented. They collect a whole bunch of data. I mean, by some estimates, they said that Gaza, the entirety of Gaza, every meter of Gaza is imaged once every 10 minutes. Every meter of Gaza is imaged once every 10 minutes. That imagery, though, I used to do photographic interpretation. My job was to get rolls of U2 film, get on a light cable, look through each thing. It took forever. But I'll say this, when I found something, I would circle it, blow it up, we'd look at it more. It took time, but we got it right. But to do this with all the imagery they're taking, you have to have an army of photo interpreters, which they don't have. So what they do is they digitize everything, then they build algorithms to assess it. They look for indications of change, and those indications of change are linked to other performance characteristics, and the computer, the artificial intelligence, does the assessment for you. You program on all the things that you're looking for, and it spits out, we think this is going to happen, or we think nothing's going to happen. We think the threat is coming from here. They did predictive analysis. Where do you think the rocket will be fired from? We believe with all the data you've put in, the rockets will be fired from here. And it became, they call it the first artificial intelligence war that took place in 2021. It was waged by intelligence, and then these people acting on perfect intelligence, meaning that you had pilots dropping bombs on top. There's not too much courage involved in that. I just want to let you know, flying at 10,000, 20,000 feet over a city that has no air defense, and then dropping bombs on innocent civilians below. I don't have a great regard for Israeli pilots, not the ones that drop the bombs. Nor do I have regard for their artillery officers or their artillerymen who fire artillery rounds, again, using this target generated from the stuff into Gaza. But they did this. I also don't have any regard for the average Israeli soldier, because like I said, not only aren't they soldiers anymore, they're an occupying force, they're not very good at fighting. We saw that in 2006 when they went up against Hezbollah in the 44-day war or 33-day war that they fought there. Hezbollah kicked the snot out of them. These guys retreated. They didn't know how to fight. They were afraid to advance. Afraid to advance. You're soldiers, you're afraid to advance. And get the hell out of the army, which most of them wanted to do to begin with. They didn't want to be there, especially the reservists called up. The Israelis have gone through a number of reorganizations since then, to try and better their combat capabilities. But it's all done with an eye on technology. How do we combine different technologies to achieve some sort of battlefield performance statistic that can get routed into an algorithm that can guarantee success? So they did all this, and Hamas isn't stupid. Like I said, in 2021, they fought against Israel and they learned. And the other thing is the Israelis bragged about it. I mean, come on, guys. What part of operational security don't you understand? If you have something that you claim worked, why are you telling the world about it? But less than 4 months after the conflict ended in 2021, they're holding conferences where they're bragging about the artificial intelligence-driven aspects of warfare, how they do things, what they were looking for, etc. And they think Hamas is stupid. Hamas ain't stupid. Some of the smartest people on the planet work for Hamas. Doesn't mean that I, agree with them. I don't. It doesn't mean I support their tactics that they use against civilians. I absolutely don't. But I don't disrespect them by saying they're stupid. Just because I view you to be a cruel terrorist doesn't mean You can't be smart. Hamas sat there and they dissected everything the Israelis did. They dissected all aspects of Israeli intelligence collection, and they dissected Israeli operations because everything's automated. Remember, they have a wall around that tells the Israelis when something happens. So the response force is triggered by the electronics coming off the wall. But the response force isn't there because they've been sent home for the Yom Kippur holiday because the algorithm said there's not going to be any problems here. Then the Hamas went around with drones and took out the automatic, because when there's a sensor at the wall, the automatic machine guns point in with sensors looking for heat movement, and they come in. And that's why the Israelis can all sleep, because the automatic response takes care of it, except it got blown up. The wall got breached. The Hamas came in, overwhelmed the sleeping defenders because they didn't have people out there on duty. They didn't have a rapid reaction force. They didn't have anything. They occupied the division headquarters of the Gaza division. They wiped out the Israelis. They annihilated the Israelis. This is one of the greatest intelligence failures in the world. Now, here's the other thing about it. Hamas is realistic. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that if you sortie out with 1,000 guys against a military that, as we saw, not only has hundreds of thousands on active duty, but can mobilize 360,000, that eventually you're going to get outnumbered, which means eventually you're going to have to fall back on your positions. They're also smart enough to listen to what the Israelis say. They know what the Israeli response is going to be, especially if you go out and you commit atrocities of this magnitude. They know the Israelis are going to seal it off, cut off power. There's not a thing the Israelis have done that took Hamas by surprise, which means that before they initiated it, they have sufficient resources stockpiled in underground facilities. Keep this in mind. As Israel blows up buildings on the top, you guys do know that the Israelis know that there's not a single Hamas person in those buildings. The Israelis know that Hamas has gone underground, which means the Israelis know that what they're doing here is called the punishment of the people, the innocent Palestinian people. Every building they blow up, every block they level is being done as an act of terrorism against the Palestinian people. So whatever moral advantage the Israelis might have accrued by saying we were attacked first, I agree with them. I mean, we could talk the historical aspect of it, meaning that really it's been a never-ending war. So you can't say I was attacked first. It's been an ongoing battle, and maybe people could say, well, if you didn't do the Nakba back in 1948, none of this would have happened to begin with. But on this occasion, they had the moral high ground. They were attacked first, and they can say, you came in and you killed civilians, lots of them. Yes, you have the moral high ground, Israel. I actually would have said Israel has every right to go in and kill every single one of them Hamas terrorists that went across the border. If I were an Israeli, that's what I'd be doing. What they don't have a right to do is collective punishment. But you see, for Israel to go in against Hamas, they would have to have a plan. But to have a plan, which means they would have to envision this. To envision this, they would have to liberate themselves from the artificial intelligence-driven intelligence estimates and actually put on their own thinking caps and figure out how to fight, and then train a force to fight. Why do they think that the Israeli army, which has been an occupation force, none of the reservists they called up are combat-hardened troops? None of them have fought a real war. All they did is break the arms of 10-year-old kids and shoot 15-year-old girls in the head. That's what they did during their time in service. Now they're expected to come together, organize and coalesce into a combat-capable force that can go into the most densely packed urban environment imaginable. The Russians should be calling up the Israelis and saying, might want to hold off on this. Let's talk about Mariupol. Let's talk about Bakhmut. We won those, but we paid a heavy, heavy price. It ain't pretty. And, you're going into something that's 10 times worse. You might want to hold off on that until you do some specific training. But no, the Israelis are there. They're going to go in. I think they're going to get slaughtered. I mean, they'll kill a whole bunch of Palestinians. But I don't think that this is going to be a victory for the Israelis. I think that the Hamas knows what they're doing. Hamas has anticipated the vast majority of the Israeli moves, and Hamas will lure the Israelis into ambushes. They're going to cost the Israelis a tremendous number of lives. And in the meantime, Israel is going to be dropping bombs on the Palestinian civilians. There's a good chance when this is all said and done that you could see more than 20,000 dead Palestinian civilians. 20,000 dead, and we call the Russians mass murderers. There's no. Do you remember when Israel dropped bombs on the on Al Qaeda positions in Aleppo? On Al Qaeda positions in Aleppo. Honest to God, Al Qaeda positions. Boom, bomb goes off. Look at those Syrians. They're the worst people in the world, bombing indiscriminately, killing these people. No, they were killing Al Qaeda, but that's okay. You can say what you want. But there's one or two bombs. Or when Russia came in and boom, took out places. Oh my God, the Russians indiscriminate. Really? Not too indiscriminate. Most of the damage you saw was done by Ukrainian anti-air missiles that went off course and hit buildings, not by the Russian bombs. The Russians are very precise. No, screaming bloody murder, war crime, war crime, war crime. Israel just leveled entire blocks, killing hundreds of innocent civilians, half of them women and children.
60% of them are under 18 years of age, mostly children, yeah.
And not a peep from the West. Talk about hypocrisy. So that's where we're at right now. I mean, the Israelis have mobilized. Hamas hasn't given up just today. After receiving all those bombardments, they fired, I forget, hundreds of rockets today that defeated the Iron Dome. Yeah, the Iron Dome is taking out some, but some get through because they overwhelm the system. They're impacting on the ground, which is a moral victory for Hamas. This is going to go on forever. Hamas has prepared for the long fight. By some estimates, people say that Hamas is ready for an 80, 90-day war, an 80 or 90-day war. Now, let's run that numbers. That means that Hamas is also ready to sacrifice a whole bunch of civilians. They're not too innocent on this one either, guys.
No, they're not.
It's the Palestinian civilian that's paying the biggest price here. They didn't ask for this. They didn't ask for Hamas to go out and do this. All they want to be is free. All they'd like to do is not live in this open air concentration camp. I was corrected on Twitter by somebody who said, stop calling it a prison, because a prison is where people who committed a crime go. None of the people in Gaza are guilty of anything except being human and living. It's a concentration camp run by Jewish descendants of Holocaust survivors of concentration camps. I mean, guys, this is about as sick as it gets. I used to be extraordinarily pro-Israel. I'm finishing up an article. That's why I was late. I'm finishing up an article right now explaining how I transitioned from being somebody who stood with Israel to somebody who will no longer ever stand with Israel. Especially as long as Benjamin Netanyahu is in power. But Israel today is a criminal state led by a war criminal. The chief of staff and the minister of defense have both committed prosecutable war crimes with their words, because their words brought about action. When you call the Palestinian people animals and you give instructions to level the building that they live in, you are a war criminal. So there's no ifs, ands, or buts. If the war stopped today, we could arrest Benjamin Netanyahu, Minister of Defense, and the Chief of Staff of the Israeli Armed Forces, and using Nuremberg standards, successfully prosecute them with war crimes that bring about the death penalty, meaning they should all be hung by the neck until dead, and maybe should be. It's not my job to say that, but the point is, Israel today is not a state worthy of anybody's support. The Israeli people are different. Look, my heart breaks because I spent a lot of time in Israel. I got to know the Israeli people, and they're not bad people, at least the ones I dealt with. Now, Israel was fundamentally changed in the 1990s when hundreds of thousands of former Soviet Jews came into Israel. They fundamentally changed the political landscape. Israel was in a relatively evenly split political landscape where Likud and Labor fought off. Yitzhak Rabin was a Labor guy. He's the one who was promoting Oslo before he was killed. Netanyahu was Likud. And to be honest, Labor was starting to prevail. Labor was starting to get this overwhelming political momentum behind it, meaning that Israel was heading to a place where if Rabin had stayed alive, Oslo would have been implemented and probably improved on. Rabin's the guy that said the Palestinians should get their land back to the Green Line of 1948. Imagine that today, that anybody thinking that. This was a man who could have changed the total dynamic of the Middle East, but he was killed by a right-wing fanatic loyal to Benjamin Netanyahu, who is now in power and destroying Israel. So there's a lot of Israelis today that, while I wish no harm on anybody, they fall into the same category as Hamas, as far as I'm concerned. Fanatics who only want death and destruction and should not be given any glorification by anybody. And so, the Israelis are just as guilty of Hamas of committing atrocities, et cetera. And again, the primary victim is the Palestinian people. I guess you could say that collateral damage goes with those Israelis who once believed in the potential of peace, but had that potential quashed when Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated on November 4th, 1995.
I mean, we can see you're writing an article because you're just a wellspring of historic information on this, and I'm glad you took us back. But by the way, what Yoav Gallant said about Hamas, about the Gaza Strip, that's actually a crime against humanity.
That's what I said. That's what I was saying. That he's the Minister of Defense.
Yeah, that's a crime against humanity.
100%.
Going back to 1993, which is the Oslo I Accord, I mean, it was Yitzhak Rabin, but also Yasser Arafat on the White House lawn with Bill Clinton. And I don't know about you, but I was just a teen. But the grown-ups in the house, I was 11, were hopeful. Hungary was complex. We had bad stuff, but it looks like the Middle East is going to be okay. There was a lot of hope going around. And that was not Hamas. That was the Palestine Liberation Organization, a secular sort of left thing. And then Hamas was amplified, mostly by Western powers, including explicitly by Israel, to go against Arafat.
I mean, the fact is, the Hamas victory in Gaza, where I think that was 2006, where they ousted the Palestinian Authority. That was orchestrated by Israel as a way of weakening Fatah and weakening Arafat and company. So you what's that old saying? You reap the wind, you sow the whirlwind, and Israel has they reap the wind, and now they're sowing it. Israel has nobody to blame but themselves. Nobody to blame but themselves. They created this problem. They created it.
Yeah.
And Scott, it's very important. You're talking about artificial intelligence. You have strong AI and you have weak AI, and this demonstrated how weak AI can be. But what do you think about Hezbollah? Is Hezbollah going to enter this fray?
Let me put it this way. I think one of the reasons why Hamas was able to pull off this attack was because of very strict operational security combined with Israeli incompetence, which means the fewer people that knew about this, the better. I don't think Hezbollah had any indication this was going to happen. They weren't mobilized for it. I don't think Iran saw this coming. I mean, everybody's out there going, well, the Iranians control everything. Not really. They control, they have funding, they coordinate, but I can guarantee you that Hamas was not on the phone with Iran saying, hey, we need your permission to do this. Hamas did this. And what Hamas is looking for isn't a wider war. Because had they been looking for a wider war, they would have had to coordinate in advance. What Hamas is looking for is a 2006 type victory against Israel. 2006 was when Hezbollah began that conflict with Israel in northern on the Lebanon border. And remember, Israel, outraged. We mobilized. We're going to destroy Hezbollah like they've never been destroyed before. We're going to come in, put them in the ground. We're going to kill them because we're Israel and we can do it. We're better than anybody else. And 33 days later, they got that stuff kicked out of them. Hezbollah didn't lose. Hezbollah didn't win by conquering Israel. Hezbollah won by surviving, by continuing the fight up until the last moment, sending rockets into Israel, by ambushing Israeli forces, by sending Israeli divisions reeling in retreat, by having Israeli reservists refusing to go to the front lines because they were scared of Hezbollah. That's the Hezbollah victory, and look how Hezbollah has suddenly rebounded from that and become what it is today. Hamas, I believe, is looking for 2006-like victory. Hamas just needs to ride this thing out and let Israel beat itself. Let Israel, again, this war criminal-like rhetoric is just digging a grave for Israel. It's digging a grave for it in terms of heightened expectations. Everybody's expecting a grand victory. I mean, Hamas will never exist after this. Never exist after this. That's what Israel's saying. How can you say that, Israel, when you couldn't imagine a Hamas attack? And now you're telling me that you can imagine you defeating Hamas in an urban warfare landscape? You haven't imagined this. You're just making it up as you go along. And that's the reality. I think the other thing that's going to happen is that the international community right now has rallied around Israel because of the horrific imagery that you get of dead civilians. And at some point in time, that imagery is going to be replaced by the overwhelming imagery of dead Palestinian civilians as the numbers rise up. I think there's the real potential for tens of thousands of Palestinians to lose their lives here, because if Israel continues to bomb the way they are right now, these people have nowhere to go. And then the disease is going to come in. They put a blockade on. And at some point in time, cholera is going to hit, typhus is going to hit. You're going to have epidemics that sweep through. It's going to be medieval in terms of what's happening. Meanwhile, Hamas doesn't quit, doesn't surrender, continues to fire missiles. I mean, if we're still doing this 40 days from now, I bet you Hamas is still firing missiles against Israel 40 days from now. Meanwhile, Merkava tanks will be burning in the streets. Israeli kids will be lying dead in the streets. Images of dead Israeli hostages. They have all these cute TikTok girls. Sorry, guys, I just have to pick on them because they wear uniforms and they're soldiers and they behave in the most unprofessional manner.
I saw some of those videos. You're completely correct.
They're good-looking girls. I have to tell you, when I first went to Israel in 1995, I went to this imagery intelligence unit, and they were putting out the evening guard. So they had basically everybody up there standing inspecting. About 80% of the girls, of the soldiers there were girls, and they all wear those extraordinarily tight uniforms, and they're all 18, 19, 20-year-old girls, and they're all carrying Uzis. And so I reported back to my gunnery sergeant. I said, "Hey, Gunny, you wouldn't believe what's happening here. I got a plaza full of Israeli girls wearing skin-tight uniforms carrying Uzis." And he said, "So you died and went to heaven." I mean, that was the idea. But the point is, I'm not knocking their professionalism. I'm just saying that, you look like the way you present yourself. And if you dress up like a TikTok star, then that's what you end up looking like. You don't look like a soldier. But Hamas has captured a whole bunch of these girls, and I'm terrified for them. Terrified for them because I don't know if they're going to survive this.
Yeah,
I don't think they will. And this is call me sexist, but I'm one of these guys that believes that if you're a man and you join the military, whatever fate befalls you, because that's what you signed up for. But if you signed up and you think that your military service is defined by sitting in an office doing TikTok videos, you didn't sign up for that. You didn't sign up for frontline combat service. You didn't sign up to be taken hostage by Hamas. And I really feel bad. And I know I'm going to get eviscerated by all the feminists out there. But hey, pound sand. If you think you can perform combat duties better than I can, you're welcome to try it. Until then, all you do is degrade the combat efficiency of the unit that I'm involved in. If you're not killing the enemy as efficiently as I am, if you're causing more casualties because of the inefficiency of your operations, I don't want you as my comrade in arms. There are jobs you can do, but being on the front line ain't one of them. And that's just my personal feeling about it. I'm the father of 2 daughters, and I don't want a glass ceiling for any of them. I want them to be able to do anything and everything they want, except go to war as a frontline combatant, because that's a different job. Just like I wouldn't want them to play in the NFL, because they can't. Even if the NFL were to open up its gates and say, we'll take women, you aren't going to get any women playing in the NFL. Not one, because they can't physically, can't do that job. It's the same thing with combat. Women can't be frontline combatants.
Scott,
Ian, go
about
ahead.
that question though, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was something I was scratching my head about. So yesterday, Israel started putting out their casualty reports. So, 27 dead, 57 dead. I was surprised by how many female names I saw in that. If you could shed some light on that, why are so many frontline soldiers and hazardous frontline duty women?
They're not frontline. They're not frontline soldiers. The Israelis have become so complacent that each one of these guard posts outside of an exit, the strong point, they have women in administrative capacities, women whose job is to answer phones, to file paperwork, to type, to do this kind of stuff. They can man electronics. So because they've automated everything, there will be some women doing the electronic stuff, but the people who strap up and go out aren't women. When you took a look at the dead soldiers on the ground wearing their combat gear, they're all men. You didn't see a single woman with a helmet and combat vest and battle vest and all that. All the women you saw were wearing, usually, not because they were killed in their sleep, or they were killed here, but the women are forward deployed in the areas they shouldn't be. Given this level of automation right now, you shouldn't have any women anywhere within striking distance of an enemy ground force. They should be pulled back into headquarters. But even the division headquarters, where are the guards? There should be a standing guard force. A standing guard force. Where are they? Why were these people caught asleep in their barracks? Because that's where the vast majority of these women died, in their barracks, either in their sleep or just waking up to have a Hamas guy pop them. Now, the thing that's going to come out, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself because this is you're going to see, though, that the vast majority of female casualties were accidental. Because Hamas, and Israeli television started to report on this, Hamas made a point, especially in the settlements, of saying, we don't kill women and children. We don't kill women and children. And you're getting more and more reports about how Hamas actually captured as many women and children as they could. They released some. I mean, my wife and I were watching one story where Anderson Cooper was interviewing this girl who talked about how the guy next to her was killed. Now, had her body been positioned behind the door, she would have been killed too, but that would have been accidental, meaning they were firing through the door. They didn't know who was behind the door. But when they opened the door, they saw her, they captured her, they brought her together with her neighbor's 2 children, and then they took them. They didn't beat them. They didn't abuse them. They took them towards Gaza, and then halfway to Gaza, they let them go and said, no, go back. You're free. Now, obviously, they didn't free everybody, but I'm just saying that, there's a lot of propaganda going out right now trying to demonize Hamas. And believe me, you don't have to work too hard to do that, guys. Sometimes telling the truth is the best thing. Just tell the truth about what happened. And you're not going to have to convince anybody out here that what happened to those party goers at the little rave that they had out there, that was murder, mass murder. Shouldn't have happened. It's horrible. Kicking down the doors of civilian residences and spraying weapons fire is murder. Murder. There's no justification for that. But that's what happened. So you don't have to make things up. But Hamas, it's a religious organization. These boys have been raised from little to, respect women. Now, everybody's going to pull out that video of them defiling the body and dragging it through. Hey, ain't nobody perfect, and but the bottom line is they're all like, well, all these women were raped. Really? Really? Hamas rapes women. You know who does rape women? The Israelis, all the time. Their security services do it by a matter of course. Why? You take a nice, chaste Palestinian girl, you put her in interrogation, and you rape her, and you film it. You film her being raped. Then you say, we have these photos and we have these images. Now we're sending you back to your family. And if you don't work for us, we release this image, and then you get killed by honor killing because you're no longer the chaste virgin that you thought. The Israelis do that all the time. Okay, I'm not making this up, guys. Everybody knows it happens. The Israelis know it happens. They're proud of it. That's because it's security, Scott. Security. This is how we have to be safe. No, it isn't, guys. It's rape. And the people who did it are rapists. The worst sort of people. But Hamas, now, again, is somebody going to be able to bring one girl and say she was raped? Maybe. I'm just saying that as a matter of course, as soon as I hear that Hamas is just on a regular basis raping Israeli women, I say that's bull. Bull. They can kill, but I don't think you're going to see a story about Hamas deliberately shooting a child. Did a child get shot? Absolutely. If they're behind the door, they spray down the door, boom, they kill the child. But it's not like they're an Israeli sniper who sits there and deliberately targets a child, shooting them in the belly, shooting them in the head. This is what the Israeli snipers do in Gaza all the time.
And then wear those T-shirts, bragging about it. Yeah.
One shot, 2 kills.
Yeah.
Or how about, again, people want to say, why is there so much violence against the settlers? I don't know. beyond the part that they're occupying land that belonged to people's, forefathers. How about 2014 in the village of Sderot, while the Israeli Air Force is blowing the living dog poop out of Gaza, the villagers come out and hold a barbecue and a picnic, and they got their chairs out there and they're eating popcorn, drinking beer, cheering every time the bomb goes off in Gaza. And then when they were interviewed, they're animals, kill them all. We don't care. No sympathy here. You don't think Hamas and the people watch that video and go, hey, everybody in that village cheered while we were getting bombed, which makes them sort of the enemy. Hate is a horrible thing. And when hate is weaponized, horrible things happen. And I think that Israel did a lot to engender a lot of hate on the part of Hamas and the Palestinians. And I think it manifested itself in the ugliest way possible on October 8th, October 9th, when Hamas went through these villages, went through these military installations. I wish they had more discipline. I wish they had taken more prisoners. I mean, when you storm a place and everybody's asleep, you don't have to shoot them all, guys. You don't have to shoot them all. You shoot the ones that resist. But if they're in their rooms and they're in their nightclothes, take them prisoner. But they if you were a man, they killed you for the most part. They killed a whole bunch of people. I think the death toll is still right.
Yeah. George Galloway, you had a wonderful appearance on the Mother of All Talk Show, said horrible things happened during a jailbreak. But unfortunately, the response is going to drown the East Mediterranean in blood. And that's unfortunately where things are heading. But you brought in Iran, and I think you've already followed this, but you'll be glad to know a lot of that has been backtracked. Initially, Iran had the plan. They aided with the planning. And the White House, Blinken, even the Israeli Defense Force, they all backtracked on this. We don't have this evidence. No, we don't think so. How do you think that change, that abrupt change happened in the course of 2 days?
Well, I think there's a couple things. I think, first of all, I think there's a lot of communication going on that we're not aware of between the West and Hezbollah, the West and Iran. Look, if Hezbollah enters this fight, it's a game changer, 100% game changer. Israel is, I think it was back in the spring, Israel ran a major exercise where they did this whole drill of what if we have to fight Hamas, the West Bank, Hezbollah, and Iran all at the same time? How do we do that? And they did the whole exercise. And while the results are classified, my understanding is they couldn't. That's the reality. That they were like, it's too much. We can't do it all. I just interviewed a guy today, Yakov Kedmi, a Russian Israeli, and he's closely tied into senior people. And he made some frightening statements, such as if Iran gets involved in this, Israel will just make Iran, unable to sustain life. The implication.
Yakov Kedmi is a military guy specifically. He's a military strategist, right?
Yeah, but he's also somebody who, was a Russian Jew who immigrated to Israel, took over the agency that brought Jews out of Russia to Israel. He fought during the 1973 Yom Kippur War. And he is somebody who speaks extensively on military issues. And he has sons and grandchildren who are in the IDF today fighting. And he's closely linked with senior Israeli decision makers. And the implication he gave today was that if Iran got involved in this fight, that Israel would probably use nuclear weapons against Iran. Very frightening possibility. But the point is that nobody wants that. Israel doesn't want it. Iran doesn't want it. And as he rightly said, look, Iran just now is starting to get back on its feet economically and starting to flex its economic potential. The last thing Iran needs is a war where they can say, well, we had the moral right to do what we did, but we destroyed everything we've just spent the last 40 years working for. Hamas did not organize this with Israel or with Iran, didn't ask their permission. So I think what's happened here is that Iran has basically said that and Hezbollah has said the same thing. Look, you guys do what you got to do against Hamas. We're going to sit here and play our political game. We're going to give verbal support and all this kind of stuff. but there won't be a major escalation unless you guys come at us. If you come at us, then it's a different game. But I think there's just a lot of communication going on. And I think Iran was asked the question, did you have anything to do with this? I think the Iranians said, hell no, we didn't have anything. We didn't want this. We don't want this. Iran, like everybody else, has been at the forefront of condemning Israel, rightly so, for the abuses of the Israeli occupation state against the Palestinians. As Muslims, devout Muslims, what Israel's done with the Al-Aqsa Mosque is just mind-boggling. Most American, I don't think Americans get it.
The third holiest place in.
One of the, it's the Mecca, Medina, Al-Aqsa. Okay, it's there, guys. I think, isn't this where Muhammad ascended to the heavens? So this is a big deal, this place, and Israel is defiling it, abusing women who are worshiping there, abusing men, beating up. I mean, this is like, how would Catholics feel if, in the Vatican, a bunch of, Muslims started rampaging through there and beating up priests and pushing people out and having rave parties. Muslims don't have rave parties, but, doing whatever they do. And that's a horrible thing. I'm going to get in trouble for that. Misbehaving inside the Vatican, underneath the Sistine Chapel. The Christian world would go insane, frothing at the mouth, demanding vengeance. I mean, every American Christian channel would be full of preachers, we must murder, we must slaughter, we must do this. They're doing that already about Israel. But I'm just saying that it's that kind of thing, guys. What the Jews in Israel, because it's a Jewish state, these are Jewish soldiers, are doing Muslims at the Al-Aqsa Mosque is unforgivable. And it enrages the Muslim world. It enrages Iran. It enrages Hezbollah. But they're not starting a war for this. Look, Lebanon's going through extraordinarily difficult times right now, economically. Hezbollah has tried to legitimize itself as a political force, and they've achieved a certain amount of credibility inside Lebanon as the honest broker, as incorruptible, as people who can get the job done. And they're heading in a direction where they're trying to get Lebanon back on its feet and so empower themselves politically. Because even though it's a militant organization, it's a political organization now, and they're looking for a political future. And that political future includes learning to peacefully live with Israel. Unlike Hamas, Hezbollah doesn't believe in they want the destruction of Israel, but it's not part of their charter. All Hezbollah wants is to get the Israelis out of Shabbat farms and now the Golan Heights. But once you get back to Israel proper, Hezbollah, I think, can live with that. So that's the trajectory that they're on. They don't want a broader war because they know that while Hezbollah might survive this and even do a whole lot of damage to Israel in the process, that Israel will destroy Lebanese neighborhoods, destroy the economy of Lebanon, destroy the people that Hezbollah is sworn to defend. So Hezbollah doesn't want this war. Iran doesn't want this war. And I think there's a lot of conversations going on behind the scenes just to make sure that there's no missed signals. There's going to be a lot of posturing. United States sending in the fleet and all this stuff. But I think there's a lot of conversation going on behind the scenes saying, hey, let's let this thing play out, and then we'll try and contain it, but we don't want this thing to blow up into a broader conflict.
Yeah,
and I think one of the
contained.
Say again?
Let's hope it stays contained. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think it will, because I don't think Israel wants a broader war. Plus, I think Israel's going to run into. I keep hearing here they're going to go in. Well, they haven't gone in yet. I think one of the reasons why they haven't gone in yet is that they don't know what to do. They don't have a plan. They have a concept, but it's not a plan. The plan has to be executed by troops that have trained to do this. So I'm hoping that a lot of Israeli commanders are saying, I'm out. We got my boys here and girls now, because you give me some girls too. And I got to take them out. We actually have to rehearse this thing. We're going to need to actually get back to the basics and train specifically for this operation. Because if you send us in now, we don't know what we're doing, and we're going to die. We're going to go in, and Hamas is waiting for us. They prepared for this. They thought this thing through. They have a plan. We don't have a plan. So I think the Israeli commanders are saying, Now watch what's going to happen. As soon as the show ends, Israel's going to go straight in Gaza and all this stuff. But my point is, from a military standpoint, they're not ready for this fight. They haven't trained for the urban conflict, not on the scope and scale they're getting ready to get involved in. And I think they understand that if they go into Gaza, it does create the potential for an expanded conflict. Because all it takes is Islamic Jihad in Lebanon, who already did a provocative move, for Islamic Jihad to do something even more provocative that provokes an Israeli overreaction that kills a whole bunch of Hezbollah, not just the 4 that they killed yesterday, but a whole bunch. Then Hezbollah has to respond hard, and next thing you know, it spins out of control, bam, and we have a general war. So I think there's a lot of political rhetoric going on, but I hope in Israel that there's some military commanders that are realistic who are saying, look, Gaza's not going anywhere anytime soon. Let's take our time. Let's do this right. Plus, the fact of the matter is, these are military professionals who don't necessarily want to be painted with the brush of being a war criminal. Right now there's legitimacy in what they do, but those pilots, there's no excuse. Those pilots should all quit before they drop another bomb. There's no excuse for what they're doing right now. It's just mass murder.
I had other questions, but I don't want to monopolize your time. I don't know how much time you have, so I wanted to let the others.
He promised us 6 hours, actually, Ben. So we
Yes.
have Scott,
Bob's a liar.
thank you for your time, Scott. I was going to ask you just about the solution, to this intractable problem that has gone on for 75 years. One state solution, a 2-state solution. And what are your thoughts on Zionism in general? Like, why do we have a state that isn't a state for all of its citizens? Why is it just a state for only the Jewish people who are its citizens? Is that in itself a problem? So I don't want to get you in too much trouble, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, let me put it this way. When I was in Israel, I had long conversations about Zionism, about Herzog, about the conceptualization of a Jewish state before World War II, before Balfour, David Ben-Gurion probably said it best. He's the father of Israel, the man who, brought Israel into being. He said, if I were a Palestinian, I'd hate the Israelis because we lie and we stole their land and we kicked them out. He said, yes, it's God's land and we have a right, we have a right to be here, but we should understand what we've done here. We've killed these people, we've driven them out of their homes, and they have every right to hate us. And if I were a Palestinian, I'd hate us too. That's the reality of it. Zionism is a disease. I hate to be too harsh, but it's a disease. And the reason why I say that is to say it's legitimate, it's got to bring benefit to everybody. Meaning that, is it wrong to say that there must be a place in the Holy Land for Jews? I don't believe it's wrong to say that. I don't believe it's wrong. I mean, if you look at the history of the Jews and the expulsion of the Jews from Israel, from the holiest place for them, I believe that for there to be justice in the world, that Jews should have a right of return and should be able to find some sort of place that they can call home in Palestine. Now that could be naive on my part. I mean, people will say, Scott, whatever. Okay, sometimes I am naive and I accept that, but I firmly believe that. So I'm not against that. What I'm against is the notion that Jews take primacy over everything else, especially Palestinian Arabs who have lived there for centuries. No, you don't get to come in and say, because I had relatives who lived here 2,000 years ago, I get to come in and kick you out that you had relatives living there a couple hundred years. Because frankly, for of the two people, the one who's been living there, who actually, was raised on that, they win. Not the Polish Jew who comes in because some Zionist organization convinced him that was the right thing to do. So I think Zionism is a disease because it's a cancer on Palestine. It infects the region. It brings nothing but harm to those who embrace it. And so I'm against Zionism. at the end of the Second World War, the creation of Israel. Look, we can choose to read Exodus and buy into that history, or we can choose to Exodus being Leon Uris's book about the formation of Israel novel, or we can read the Palestinian history of the Nakba and understand what happened there too. The fact of the matter is, again, we come back to Ben Gurion and other people who wrote the history of that. What the Israelis did to the Palestinians in 1948 is a war crime, is a crime against humanity. They shouldn't be rewarded for it. If the Israeli state had to be born from the suffering of so many Palestinians, then maybe the Israeli state shouldn't have been born to begin with. But it was. So we have to deal with that reality.
Yeah.
And so I'm somebody who, look, I wasn't born a pro-Palestinian activist. And to be honest, I'm not a pro-Palestinian activist. And the reason why I say that is I don't know enough about it. I'm studying it, but I'm late to the party. And when I entered the party, I actually was pro-Israeli. I working with the Israelis in the aftermath of Desert Storm. I'm just being dead honest. I bought into the Israeli, the Yitzhak Rabin vision of Israel. And that's the vision. I have taken the stance I've taken today, not because I suddenly woke up one day and say, Yasser Arafat's a good guy. He's not. He never was a good guy. Maybe young he had an ideal, but he turned into this corrupted individual with a Palestinian authority that was corrupt. The whole concept of Palestinian statehood was not pure. And it was being used by Jordanians, by Egyptians, by Saudis, by Syrians. Do people understand that the King of Jordan launched a genocidal attack against Palestinians in 1972 that led to the Black September movement? The Black September wasn't about Palestinians going against Israel. Black September was about Palestinians going against the King of Jordan. So the fact is, the whole Palestinian cause is not pure in my mind. I don't sit there and go, I believe in the Palestinian cause. I don't. But what I condemn, what I'm against more than anything is Benjamin Netanyahu. Benjamin Netanyahu is the personification of evil. He's been that way from the very inception. I first learned of Benjamin Netanyahu in 1982 when a Marine captain jumped on a tank in Beirut, pulled his pistol, and told the Israeli colonel that in order to get the three tanks through Marines' line, they'd have to go over his dead body. But before he died, he pumped one right through the lieutenant colonel's head. Because that's what Marines do. And the Israelis walked away. But the State Department called the charge d'affaires in to complain about this. Benjamin Netanyahu was the name of the charge d'affaires. And he immediately started spreading rumors about the Marine captain, saying, my understanding is that he had alcohol in his breath. Hey, that's a Marine officer on duty. Alcohol? I don't think so. But that's the kind of scumbag Benjamin Netanyahu is. He's been a scumbag ever since. He's a man who got Yitzhak Rabin killed. He's the guy that led a precision of people with a coffin with Yitzhak Rabin's name on it. He's the guy, while people were shouting, death to Rabin, did nothing to stop it. He's the guy that said Yitzhak Rabin had committed crimes against the Jewish faith that allowed radical Jewish rabbis to issue a death proclamation that right-wing, radical Israeli fanatic executed Rabin because of it. Benjamin Netanyahu killed the hope for peace in the Middle East. And ever since then, he's been a practitioner of violence, of hatred. He's scum personified. And yet he's in charge in Israel, and he's got the support of a lot of people in Israel. So when I take a look at the two causes, Palestinian versus what passes for Israel today, the Palestinian cause is the lesser of two evils. Now, when I say cause, the Palestinian people are victims here. Don't misunderstand everything I'm saying. I am saying, though, that these victims are victimized two ways. They're victimized by the Israelis, and they're victimized by their own leadership. Because the Palestinian leadership is politically corrupt, and they use the suffering of the Palestinian people to enrich themselves. These aren't good people. They're not good people. Oh, yeah. And one of the reasons why they're not good is that the CIA and Israeli intelligence works to make them not good. We're the ones who buy them off. We're the ones who bribe them. We're the ones who corrupt them. And so, again, the Palestinian people, I think, are the ultimate victims, but so too are the millions of Israelis that, while I was in Israel in the 1990s, believed in peace. and supported peace. They've been victimized by Benjamin Netanyahu too. He's old, his heart's failing. He won't be around too much longer because he's really the word. And when he goes, there should be a global celebration. Nobody should mourn his passing. Everybody should fire fireworks into the sky because ding dong, the witch is dead. But until then, he's there. He's in charge, and he's responsible for mass murder. I hope that the legacy of what's happening to Hamas right now, not Hamas, but happening to the Palestinians in Gaza, is that Benjamin Netanyahu's final chapter will be war criminal, and that the world recognizes him for the evil that he is.
I hope so too. I mean, you probably know this, but the first headline that came up on Haaretz on Saturday as the Al-Aqsa storm or flood was beginning was putting it all at the feet of Benjamin Netanyahu, that he was involved in 3 corruption cases. There was, protests on every street. He was in deep doo-doo before this happened. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on, is there a connection there? This obviously got him out of a tight spot domestically.
I'm not going to say that there's a 9/11 type, conspiracy, that people.
Well, he did. He called it.
I know. But I mean, we don't need to go down that path. I think that Benjamin Netanyahu is a corrupt, evil individual. And I think that he is his corruption and the evil nature of his character led to a division in Israel that manifests itself by taking an already dysfunctional security and intelligence system and making it more so. When you have thousands of Israeli reservists saying publicly, we won't serve. And you have to understand that mindset permeates throughout the military, meaning that people that should be focused on their security job are instead focused on politics. Could you imagine what would go on in the minds of your average military officer who took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States if January 6th had manifested itself in the overthrow of Congress, the suspension of the Supreme Court, and Donald Trump saying, I'm dictator? I'm not saying that was the job. I'm just saying, let's just say that happened. You're in the military and you took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution. Yet the man who's there, yes, he was elected, but he's there in an unconstitutional manner. Do you think they're really going to be focused on the upcoming operation in Syria? So they're going to be sitting there going, what the hell is going on at home? My country ain't what it was. Something's happening here. Netanyahu is a living manifestation of Israel. Doesn't have a constitution, but they have something called the basic law. And basic laws are being violated by Netanyahu. What he's doing with the courts is horrifically disruptive. So do you think that the military officers who should be focused on their job, instead they have to come home and go, what is Israel that we live in? Is this the Israel that I want to be a part of? Can I defend this Israel? I mean, this guy is scum, what he's doing. They're getting debates with their other officers who say, no, he's the best thing. This is the way forward. Now they're arguing about this. Their minds aren't focused on their job. I think that's what happened in large part. I think Benjamin Netanyahu infected Israel, and Israel became dysfunctional. And that dysfunction added to the other things we talked about, the over-reliance of artificial intelligence, the ability to empower a new conception, the lack of genuine warrior spirit among the IDF mainstream forces. I think Benjamin Netanyahu took something that's already weakened and fundamentally broke it. He's the worst thing that ever happened to Israel, the single worst thing that ever happened to Israel.
And a peaceful solution. Like there's been a non-existent pursuit of a just peaceful solution. And I mean, but like you said, since Rabin, that's kind of been the status quo. It's not like Olmert or any of the guys before, or Netanyahu, in his previous presidencies, ever seriously pursued peace. Because while they said, yeah, we want a two-piece solution, two-state solution, they've been continuing to gobble up, parts of the state that is supposed to be a Palestinian state. But yeah, what can we say about peace? What can we say about ending this cycle? Like, how do we get from where we are to some kind of settlement where the cycle of killing ends? I'm thinking it's not going to happen until the West is in considerable decline and can no longer support and prop up Israel, right? So Israel, I mean, as long as they've got the West backing, they're not gonna put aside their Jewishness. No, it's going to be a Jewish state. We're going to treat Palestinians like second-class citizens. That's going to continue until the West doesn't have the power anymore to support them militarily, financially, just like we're doing to Ukraine right now.
Or Israel is strategically defeated. And I think that's more likely than not than the other way around, because there's too much political investment into Israel for people to for the investors to walk out. It's the investment going to have to go south. Most people don't withdraw from an emotional investment because they're starting to look at the numbers and going, we might lose some money on this one. They stay with it until it's reached a point of collapse, and they pull their money out, unless they shorted it. But maybe some people are short in Israel right now. Who knows? But I think there's a real potential of collapse in Israel. A real potential. Benjamin Netanyahu will have to be gone, and again, sooner rather than later. And I mean removed totally, permanently from the political scene, because he's just like the bad thing that just keeps hanging around. You can't get rid of him. He's there. No matter how many times you think he's dead and gone, he comes back, because Israel's fundamentally broken. Fundamentally broken. You're going to have to break the back of the Israeli right wing. And that the only way you can break that is through a strategic defeat of an issue that they have fundamentally aligned themselves with. And I think Hamas could be that. Again, I'm not here cheering on Hamas, and I don't want anybody to accuse me of doing that. It's an organization that embraces an ideology that's fundamentally unacceptable, premised on the destruction of Israel, premised on violence, not looking for a peaceful resolution to this problem. But Hamas might be the tool that breaks Israel, because I do believe that Israel's not going to win this fight. I do believe that Hamas is going to get a political victory out of this fight by surviving. And the empowerment that takes place afterwards will be of a magnitude that Israel is going to be compelled to jettison failed leadership. Again, Scott, you're naive, maybe. But you asked me about a path to peace, because I agree with you. If Israel continues to survive as a functional, even a dysfunctional state with a relative level of survivability built in there, as long as it's propped up by American taxpayer dollars and global support, Israel will survive. The solution can only be found when Israel's only path towards survival is in a compromised political solution with the Palestinians on what the future looks like, whether it's a single state, whether it's a two-state solution. I don't know. That's a decision that the Palestinians and the Israelis get to make together. But right now, Israel's taken a position that there won't be. It's just Israel, only Israel. And they just want the Palestinians to go away. That's unsustainable. That's unsupportable. I can never support that. People ask me, why don't you stand with Israel? Because of that. I stood with Israel when Yitzhak Rabin was the guy saying, I'm trying to find a solution for peace. Okay, I can stand with that Israel. I can't stand with this Israel. I won't stand with this Israel. I'm not standing with Hamas, but I won't stand with Israel. And I am rooting against Israel right now. I'm rooting for the strategic defeat of Israel, because that's the quickest path to peace. The same thing I say about Ukraine. I don't want harm and suffering to the Ukrainian people. That's the last thing I want. Unless, of course, you're affiliated with Azov, Aidar, Kraken, or any one of these neo-Nazi groups, then the hell with you, die. But anybody else, no. But the quickest path towards ending your suffering is the strategic defeat of Ukraine. So as somebody who wants peace, it's peace through a decisive Russian victory. If you want peace in Israel right now, it's going to have to be a decisive Hamas victory. As tough as that is to swallow, that's the only way to break Israel at this point in time. And Israel needs to be broken, must be broken.
Yeah, it just can't be the last 40 years where they get away with impunity with all sorts of crimes. They expand, they take land, and then they say, oh, but here's an agreement that obviously Palestine can't accept. And then they say, look, they're not willing to deal. It's not our fault. They've been doing this over and over again. I was wondering, unless someone else has a question, if you want to transition to the fascinating economic side of things, because I really enjoyed when you talked about the G20, you know, when Modi had this thing about an Arab Israeli European corridor that basically bypasses, you know, the Suez Canal. It's going to be more expensive. Well, that seems dead now because it required Saudi Arabia to make good with Israel, and they said they abandoned it. So the whole region, the oil heartland of the world, would be involved if this expands. You know, the shekel has lost tremendous amount of value. The US is in enormous amount of debt. The SPD, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, is on record low, like 30-year low. Like all of this combined, do you have a view on the economic prospects underpinnings of this conflict?
Well, I mean, let's go to Benjamin Netanyahu's presentation at the General Assembly in the United Nations. If you remember, a couple of years ago, he famously brought out a map in a red pen, and it showed the atomic bomb. The Iranian atomic bomb is the greatest threat in the world. But what's amazing about that is nothing's changed to get him to change his calculations. I mean, there is no JCPOA. Iran's enriching uranium at a higher degree, 60% now, than they ever have. So one would think he'd be up there with a bomb saying, "They're here now. They're here. It's going to blow up. We're all going to die." Didn't do that. What he said is,
yeah, it was a Looney Tunes bomb, right? A round one with a fuse, like the cartoon bomb.
Yes.
I think I remember. Yeah.
Say again. I got my dogs acting up right now.
Hey, Maverick, I was just saying it's a Looney Tunes bomb, one of those cartoon round bombs with a fuse, right? I think I remember that.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. It's beyond my control. The FedEx just showed up at the door, and I can't control that. Okay, they're gone, so the barking should subside. Thank you, audience, for having tolerance for Maverick's bad behavior. Okay, guys, they're gone. So the map that Benjamin Netanyahu put out, he talked about stuff magically arriving in Dubai, and then magically going through the United Arab Emirates, up through Saudi Arabia, through Jordan, and into Haifa, port of Haifa, Israel, then all the way across into Greece. The interesting thing about that map that he talked about, not only does it require, this magical repair of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel, which, to be honest, they were moving in that direction. They were moving in that direction. I don't think they ever would have gotten it because the fundamental problem was the Palestinian issue, and Israel was just being stupid. I mean, you can't expect Saudi Arabia to normalize relations with a nation that's abusing Muslim worshippers at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. I mean, that alone is a killer. But now it's dead. But it was dead before it even started. Why? The purpose of that was not just to help the dollar and help the shekel and all that. It was the counter China. The Belts and Roads Initiative. Them Chinese, them sneaky Chinese, they've been running around the last decade spending $7 to $10 trillion with a T to develop the world's infrastructure. Shame on those Chinamen. Why are they doing that? Why are they doing that? That's our job. We can't let the Chinamen do that. We got to do it. So we're going to hold this festival here in the G20, and we're going to come out with this whole bunch of people. I mean, they had everybody there. The Saudis, the United Arab Emirates, they had France, they had Spain, they had the EU. They were all there, big party. And they said, we're making this thing happen. India, Middle East Economic Corridor. And it's going against the Chinese because them are sneaky Chinamen. We got to beat them. Well, guess what? Okay, so you come out of Mumbai. It's an Indian port. It's been developed up. It doesn't need too much development. So you're not going to get too much investment there. They might build up some things here, but put them on a ship, cargo ships. They already exist. This isn't going to build new cargo ships. They already exist. And they're going to bring these cargo containers to Dubai, already an expansive port. But now it goes on a railroad. Well, Dubai has a railroad. The UAE has a railroad. It's going to need to be upgraded. There has to be connectivity issues with the rest of the Gulf Cooperation Council. They've been trying to do that for 17 years. It hasn't worked. But now because America's involved, apparently it's going to work overnight. But what we don't realize is that railroad in the United Arab Emirates, built by the Chinese, is part of the Belts and Roads Initiative. And whoever's going to do the upgrade, the Chinese own the contract. So it'll be Chinese companies upgrading the UAE railroad to get connectivity with a Saudi railroad built by the Chinese, who have the contract to upgrade the railroad. If you don't understand what I'm trying to tell you right now, is that none of this happens without the Chinese. None of this happens without the Belts and Roads Initiative, which means, what the hell are we doing this for to begin with? It's a fraud. But that's okay. Let's say we do this and we get up there to the Jordanian border and we miraculously get the Jordanians to agree to this. They haven't, by the way. Let's say they say, yeah, we'll let you build this Chinese railroad through our territory, connect with Haifa. At least now we're in an Israeli-controlled thing, finally saw, no, wait, $1.7 billion worth of Chinese investment to make Haifa the port that it is. The Chinese control the operations. Belts and roads, new belts and roads. All right, let's get the hell out of this continent. It's a sick continent. The Chinese have been there too long. We're going to go to Europe. Europe's a stronghold. Put them on a ship. Now if we go to Greece, to the port of Piraeus, which 800 billion million euros, Chinese development, belts and roads. The Chinese are everywhere. The Chinese have been doing this better than we have. This is all a fraud. It's all a fraud. It was never going to work. When they got together and they talked about it, when Netanyahu talked about it, and they talked about the G20, what they were talking about is a concept, because in their little document, they said within 60 days, they said none of this is nobody's politically committed to this, meaning that it's useless. And with 60 days, we're going to get together to try and breathe life into this. Well, that's over because Saudi Arabia is out. This will never happen. But this is every aspect of America's emergency response plan to the collapse of the American economic empire. We don't have a plan. And any plan we come up with is just made up on the spot. My God, whoever came up with that should be exiled from government permanently or given a job writing comedy for Saturday Night Live, because this wasn't a real plan. This was a joke. Did you not do your research before you started connecting the dots? Did you not know that the Chinese were there before you? This is like going and saying you're going to explore the South Pole, and you get there, and the damn flag of the opposition's already planted there. Going to the moon, you land, there's the American flag. They were there before us. This is just stupid, but this is Biden. This is the Biden administration. It's also the Trump administration before him, the Obama administration before him. This is modern America. We don't have any creativity in the world because we don't know how to work with the world. We continue to believe in American exceptionalism. We continue to believe that because we're Americans, the world should do what we want to do. Go back to Scooter Libby, I believe, when the Bush administration came in, where he said, America makes its own reality. We don't have to deal with history. History is inconvenient. All we have to do is come in, and I got to start being a Leninist. Well, maybe, but I just my hairstyle. But no, I'm not a Leninist. But look, I'm not denigrating Leninists. I don't know what I am, to be honest. I'm about as apolitical of a person as you can get. I just want to try to do the right thing. That's all. If doing the right thing is a political belief, then sign me up. Otherwise, I don't buy into too much politics because I think they're doing more to benefit themselves than they are to benefit the people that need the help. Maybe is that Leninism? Then sign me up. But the point is, the United States believes, that just because we want it, therefore it shall be. Look at the whole Biden administration's national security strategy document that they published in 2022, I believe they did. It's all premised on the rules-based international order. That's all they talk about. We're here to preserve the rules-based international order. Well, what is the rules-based international order? It's just a bunch of rules that we wrote. It's not like the world, the United Nations, the world came together at the end of World War II to come up with something called the United Nations. And they wrote a charter. We signed into it. And it's sort of the values that the world's supposed to aspire to. One would think that the rules-based international order are derived from the rules set forth in the charter. No, it has nothing to do with the charter. It has everything to do with empowering America, creating a global economic system that we dominate, we get to use for our sole benefit. That's what it's all about. And it's being attacked. So our national security strategy is premised on the necessity of sustaining a rules-based international order that deviates from everything the rest of the world agrees to in the United Nations Charter. We're exceptional, all right? We're exceptional in that we are isolated. We're the only ones promulgating this. Those are the few nations that we can fully cajole and bribe to be on our side until they realize that the dollars we're bribing them with are worthless now because of de-dollarization, collapse of the petrodollar, and the ultimate collapse of the American economy. And I don't want the American economy to collapse. I live in America. Okay, I have savings, not much, but I have savings that I plan. I'm 62. In 3 years, I'm supposed to retire and get a Social Security check, and I'm supposed to kick back my feet up and drink a margarita and spend the rest of my life in blissful ignorance of the world around me. Well, that ain't going to happen. But that especially isn't going to happen if America's economy collapses. I'll be spending the rest of my life scratching to earn a living like the rest of Americans. We don't want the American economy collapse. But that's the direction we're heading because of our really bad leadership. And the leadership is really bad because it's bought into this false premise of an American exceptionalism that says that a rules-based international order is what the world needs. The world wants multipolarity. They don't want American singularity. America can be part of that multipolar solution, and the sooner we join it, the better off we shall be. As long as we insist that we're large and in charge, that the world has to revolve around us, it's a one-way path to economic hell.
Scott, we're here to expose Imperial Decline. That's the name of our broadcast. We rebranded recently. And so that's what we're doing. And so I really appreciate you being so generous with your time, sharing your thoughts. I don't want to run you off, but my blood sugar is very low. Does anybody go ahead, Ian.
I do. One last question for you. You brought up, since we segued into economics and, the USA, what do you think as an American citizen, as an American taxpayer, what should they think about? What should they be worried about in regards to this development in Gaza? What does this mean for us? What does this mean for our tax dollars? What does this mean for weapons shipments?
Well, let's just look at the insanity of it. The Biden administration, without really asking the American people, bought off on this $100 billion war with Ukraine. We said it was the most important thing in the world. I mean, it was. I mean, come on, guys, you've been watching TV. I mean, it's existential in nature, man. Those Russians, those bastards, are out there beating up the most peaceful democratic people in the world, the Ukrainians. And they've been calling them ugly names, and we got to rally around them. American democracy depends upon it. Depends upon
Freedom is at stake.
Freedom is at stake. Freedom. Mel Gibson could come up there and just paint his face blue and scream it. And people believe it. But then all of a sudden, literally overnight, erase Ukraine. It doesn't exist. We're diverting everything to Israel. What's that tell you about the reality of Ukraine? It was never, ever the existential issue that it was. We were lied to and deceived the entire time. Lied to and deceived, which doesn't mean just Ukraine, but NATO, everything we talked about that was leading up to this. Russia's role in the world, gone instantaneously. The most important thing in the world is Israel. And we just had a long conversation where I'm trying to convince the listeners or anybody who, because I'm pretty sure that your audience that's tuned in probably aligned with you somewhat. So I'm not convincing them anything. They're probably going, yeah. But hopefully some people will watch this who aren't, politically aligned with the philosophies here. And what I'm trying to tell you guys is Israel is a disaster, an absolute disaster. We shouldn't be supporting it. It's not worthy of our support. We should be rooting against Israel. We need the collapse of Israel, because only by collapsing Israel can we create the conditions for Israel to live in peace and harmony with its neighbors. But Israel can only live in peace and harmony when the concept of Israeli exceptionalism is done away with, just like the concept of American exceptionalism must be done away with. Jews are not super people. They are not the superior race. They can believe that they're God's chosen one, but I happen to believe that there's billions of other people around the universe that if there is a God, God supports them just as much as he supports the Jews. And that we shouldn't be putting the Jews ahead of anybody. We can respect their religion. Don't have to agree with their religion. Respect their religion and respect their right to worship their religion as they see fit, so long as it does not manifest itself in harm against other human beings. The state of Israel right now is only about inflicting harm on people, only about that. It cannot exist as it's currently organized. And yet we're going to now divert all of our resources into breathing life into this moribund, disgusting, decrepit, infected nation. Yeah, I said it. So, the fact is, what we're learning here is that our government doesn't stand for anything. That when you scratch an issue, that they say is the most important thing in the world, it suddenly isn't that important. And let me tell you why I'm saying that about Israel. Because at some point in the near future, the United States, like the rest of the world, is going to be confronted with thousands, if not tens of thousands, of dead Palestinians, most of them children. The visuals are going to be horrific, and they're going to be of such a scope and magnitude that they're going to erase the images of the dead Israelis from the Hamas, the original Hamas attack. Not only that, but we're going to be confronted with images of diseased people, starving skeletal children in the street, infected with cholera and dysentery. Mothers trying to suckle a newborn baby at a breast that has no milk, and the baby's dead already. And this is going to be going across the TV channels. And Israel's still going to be bombing and blowing up buildings and killing people, and Hamas is still going to be resisting. And suddenly the world's going to say enough is enough. This is done. You have to stop. And the pressure will be put on Israel to stop. Now, let me just tell you right now, if we can get it, if we can put pressure on Israel to stop at that point, we can put pressure on Israel to stop right now. Not another person needs to die. A real leader in America would pick up the phone and tell Benjamin Netanyahu, stand down. You don't get to do this. No. Stop. But then you have a diplomatic solution. But we don't have real leadership and all this stuff. But what's going to happen then is we're going to realize that everything being told right now where we have to do all this diversion to save Israel because it's existential, we'll find out it meant nothing. It means nothing. The only thing that means anything, and this is the God's honest truth, is the political ambition of each individual politician. The only thing that matters is their ability to get reelected. And they will lie, they will cheat, they will steal, they will deceive their respective constituents to try and intimidate them into continuing to vote for them. When the reality is everybody out there who has been voted in should be voted out. I mean, that's the bottom line. There should be a way for all of us to get together and say, if you're in Congress, you don't ever get voted in again. You have failed. You're part of a collective failure. I mean, come on, look at Congress right now. Pathetic. All of them have to go. If you've been elected president, if you've ever served as president, we never vote for you again. If you've ever run for office, we don't vote for you. Only new people get to come in. New people with new ideas. Now, that's naive again. Yes, on that one I agree. I'm quite naive. But the point is, if we don't do that, if we don't have that kind of urge, all we do is we find out that the entire system is controlled by liars who deceive people through manipulation of the mainstream media to get them to buy into a narrative that's designed not to save the world, make the world safer, but to empower themselves to sustain their ability to stay in power. And that's the reality of what's going on. As you take a look at this, none of this needs to happen. None of this has to happen. All of it can be stopped, but none of it will be stopped, because to stop it means you actually have people who care about humanity. None of our politicians care about humanity. They only care about perpetuating their continued hold on power.
Scott, we're trying to end on a positive note. Would you please stop injecting reality into
He was there, Reverend Scott. He was preaching, and then it went a little dark. But for someone who proclaimed to be late to the learning, you know a lot more than us, and that's all I can say to the audience as well. Just don't stop learning, I guess.
Knowledge is power, baby. Knowledge is power.
So thanks for being generous with your time, Scott. I'm going to end the stream. My blood sugar is so low right now, but thank you very much, and we hope to have you back at some point.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. No, it's always a pleasure to come on here, and I know I'll get eviscerated for the things I say here, but what the heck, I'm not running for office, so it doesn't matter.
What a
Thank you very much, Scott. We'll see you next time. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks.
Thanks. Mm-hmm.